This on my wrist here is the brand new Apple Watch Series 7 that I've been using for a little while now. It's got a rounder shape, a larger and more durable display, and faster charging. It's been an interesting experience and one that I'm going to talk to you about in this video. But first, let's start at the beginning. The unboxing experience with the Series 7 is very similar to last year's Series 6 in that you get two boxes, one housing the Apple Watch and another for the band. Now in the box that houses the Apple Watch, you get some quick start information paperwork, and like last year, Apple have removed the charging brick, but they've included the charging pad, which this year is a USB-C cable. As well as that, you get the Apple Watch, which is in this green protective paper, and this year we've seen an increase on both sizes. This is the larger 45mm size, and for those outside of the watch world, that 1mm size might not seem that big. However, it has a noticeable impact on the wrist and in daily wear. So here's your first look at that brand new green color. This is the first time that we've seen Apple introduce this in this green color on the Apple Watch. And it's certainly not as bright as I was expecting, particularly if you compare that with the Cerachrome bezel on a Rolex Submariner. I mean, that looks noticeably green, whereas this is much more subdued. It actually reminds me a lot of last year's Series 6, the blue, which isn't too bright. Now, talking of last year's Series 6, this is the Series 7. If I put them side by side, you'll notice that the display is slightly larger. It's actually larger by about 20%. So not that much more noticeable, but it will be noticeable if you have, let's say, a Series 3, where on the new Series 7, that display is almost 50% larger. So a big update there. Now, one of the other things that I have noticed immediately is that the case is more rounded on the Series 7 than on the previous generation Series 6. But in terms of thickness, they look like they're about the same. Now let's take a quick look at the band that comes with the green Apple Watch. So it's this Clover Sport Band. And on first impressions, I was expecting this to be brighter, but a bit like the Apple Watch, it isn't a bright green. And I think that will please a lot of people. Green recently has been incredibly popular in the watch world. What I would recommend is not to worry too much about dressing it up or dressing it down, just to wear it as it is and just go with the flow. Let me get out of the way the first most common question that gets raised on these type of videos, and that is, EMKWAN, I have last year's Series 6, should I upgrade to the Series 7? And for those of you asking this question point blank, I would say no. A lot of updates over the last couple of years aren't intended necessarily for most consumers to upgrade on a yearly basis. But now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about what is different and what stands out about the Apple Watch Series 7. So one of the benefits this year in the redesign on the Apple Watch Series 7 is to make it more durable when compared with previous generations. And Apple have done this in two ways, playing around with the geometry and also with the crystal on the top. Now, interestingly, the aluminum version still uses the Ion X. If you want a more scratch-resistant crystal, then you'll find that on the stainless steel and titanium versions. But essentially, the Apple Watch Series 7 models are going to be more durable when it comes to crack resistance. The Apple Watch Series 7 is swim-proof, so it is water resistant, but this year they've added dust resistance as well. Now, one of the big updates that we have to talk about is that larger display. I certainly noticed that, and I think if you're coming from a Watch 3 or 4 or even Watch Series 5, you'll appreciate that larger display. There are benefits, obviously, to that larger display, starting off with the mundane, which are new watch faces. Apple have included 3 new ones. They're pretty cool. The first one is Contour, which shows you just how far that display has been spread back, because you get the numbers on all the edges, and you can even play around with the digital crown just to make them bounce a little. It's quite fun. There's also the modular Duo, which gives you basically more information on that display. And then the final one, which I'm a big fan of, is the World Timer, a nod at the complications that you find in traditional watches. The World Timer at a glance will give you a look at different times in different cities of the world. It's got this really cool graphic as well. Now, one of the other benefits of that larger display is the menu options a bit more clearly defined. Now being able to type on a QWERTY keyboard on this display is pretty cool, and it also supports the quick swipe function as well. You're also going to get a brighter display when it comes to wrist down. This is the feature for always on display, and indoors, Apple are saying that it's been increased to almost 70% more brighter, I certainly did notice when I had that feature turned on. When it comes to health monitoring, the Apple Watch Series 7 has identical sensors inside as the Series 6, so there's nothing new that's been added, but you do get heart rate notification, you get blood oxygen, you get ECG, fall detection. One of the updates that has been made to WatchOS 8 is now that you get a new reflect mode within the mindfulness app, and this is something that I actually do use. So something to be aware of, on the Series 7, we don't get any updates to the processor. So it's using the same chip as you'll find on the Series 6. It's just renamed the S7. It's still a dual core processor. It's still fast. And now with WatchOS 8, with things being a little more tightened up on the software side, I still feel that with the Series 6 and WatchOS 8, you're still getting a fluid, fast experience. So expect the same. All right, let's talk about the all-important battery life. This is something that is very comparable on the Series 7 with the Series 6. So you're gonna get kind of all day battery life. I was able to take this off the charge at about 6 in the morning and be able to use this all the way through to about 11 at night, sometimes 12 at night. There are a couple of factors that will really improve the battery life. The first one is turning off the background app refresh. And what I also noticed was turning off the always on display, which is weird because it's a key feature of Series 6 and Series 7, but turning that off will really maximize the battery life. So yeah. Now on Watch Series 7, you're able to charge from 0 to about 80% in 45 minutes. I was getting between 45 and 50 minutes, which is pretty decent. It is an update from, I think it was like a 90 minutes, almost 100 minutes on the Series 6. That is going to impact some people. And the other interesting thing related to charging is that if you want to use your Apple Watch Series 7 for sleep tracking, listen to my rant in a moment, but 8 minutes of charge will give you around about 8 hours of sleep tracking. So this was something that a lot of people had issues with because it meant that they needed to charge their Apple Watch after a full day in order to kind of use the sleep tracking. So Apple have fixed that. But let's talk about sleep tracking. This is probably the one feature on WatchOS that I wish Apple would improve. They are leagues behind when it comes to sleep tracking on, let's say, Fitbit or very many other applications out there. I was hoping Apple would update that on this particular Series 7, but I guess we'll have to wait a little longer. There are a bunch of really cool colors within the aluminum range to choose from this year. I think Starlight's going to be quite popular. There's a Midnight, which is a combination of gray and blue black mixed up into one. That really is the summary of the Apple Watch Series 7. Having used it, it isn't a major update. It's a minor update from Series 6, but I think if you're going to be coming new, considering for the first time purchasing an Apple Watch, the Series 7 is certainly a lot worth considering. If you want to save on the budget, then do consider the Apple SE, even the Series 3. But if you want to spend a bit of money and have an Apple Watch that will last you a few years, the Series 7 will do you just fine. And also for those people with the older Apple Watch, Series 3, Series 4, Series 5, that are considering getting an upgrade, I think the speed bumps, I think the additional features and that larger display certainly will make it a tempting buy. Or if you want to hold out, perhaps for next year, as many of us were expecting a redesign, we might get a redesign next year, perhaps even some new features. That's certainly also a consideration. Let me know your thoughts about the brand new Apple Watch Series 7 in the comments down below. And if you're new here, be sure to hit subscribe, join me here on the channel, and check out this other video where I talk about more Apple products. I'll see you there next. Peace and blessings.